All right, Sam. I think we should get started. What do you think?
Let's get started. Yeah.
All right. I think we have a whole bunch of people watching on YouTube as well while we're streaming this. All right, Vineet, welcome, man. Welcome to Clubhouse.
Thank you. Thank you.
What do you know about Clubhouse before we start?
Not much. This is my first week. Actually, it's my first time that I'm joining any particular club or any particular room.
All right. It's very easy. It's just native. You just talk as much as you want when you want, especially if you're a speaker. Hey, Gaurav, I've just pulled you up. I've pulled you up to be a speaker, Gaurav. So feel free to join as a speaker and jump in whenever you can. No pressure. All right, folks. Very warm welcome. Nice, Vineet. I see you updated your bio. That was very quick work.
Yep.
Good stuff. All right, folks. Very warm welcome to all of you. This is the second Clubhouse room that we are doing at Interview Kickstart. The topic is Faang versus startups. I think this is something that every engineer is constantly asking themselves at I'd say at different points in their career, especially if you are thinking about what next, right? So our goal today is to explore this room, all its dimensions, obviously take a lot of questions. I want to just give like a 30-second intro, and then I'm going to let Soham and Vineet introduce themselves. So Vineet, very, very interesting. Vineet used to be at a startup called ShopBop, right? Is that right, Vineet, correct?
And yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's a little interesting story. So ShopBop is a subsidiary of Amazon, but it does
got acquired by Amazon, right?
Yeah.
It does operate independently.
Yeah, exactly. So
I see.
That's why it has like both flavors. It has flavor of startup, and it also has a backing of a big company.
Awesome. So Vineet's an interesting guy to talk about this topic because Vineet spent a lot of time at Bloomberg, right? Then at ShopBop, which is a startup. ShopBop got acquired by Amazon, and Amazon did something very interesting. When they acquired ShopBop, they actually interviewed everybody, and you had to actually pass the Amazon interview bar to actually get into Amazon. So Vineet's seen this, more traditional company like Bloomberg, startup ShopBop, then at Amazon, and the other person on here is my official partner in crime, the crime lord himself, Soham. Soham and I run Interview Kickstart. Soham was very early at Box, very, very early at Box, and stayed all the way up to the IPO. So that was his real startup gig, apart from obviously Interview Kickstart. Before that, Soham was at eBay, Microsoft. So also seen all sides of this. I actually been working in the startup ecosystem for the last 10 years. I worked as the CEO of a startup company. I've run my own startup. I'm running another startup of my own right now, which is Interview Kickstart. And I've spent 5 years on the dark side, which is venture capital. So we've seen this from different angles. And the goal here is to explore all of this. We'll start off with a few questions, and then that we want to explore, and then we are going to bring in people, right, and take questions that we might have from the audience. But before I do that, Vineet, tell us a little bit about yourself, dude. What have I not covered?
I also have a little bit of experience in another startup, but that was 20 years ago. That was right after my undergrad. So it's been an interesting journey. So in India, I joined this startup called Selectica, and then I came here to do my master's. Then I spent 10 years in Bloomberg, and then 5 years in ShopBop, and now I'm in Amazon, a group called Amazon Live. So I'm a software development manager right now, and I started my journey as a developer. So in Bloomberg, I spent about 7 years as a developer before moving on to a managerial role, which is called like a team lead as a starting level manager in Bloomberg. So I have about 7-8 years of management experience right now.
And when you say here, you mean the Bay Area?
No, I'm actually on the East Coast.
New York, East Coast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. That's another dimension to this. Soham, you want to quickly tell people about yourself and then we jump in?
You already I think summarized quite a bit. There's nothing really more to it. It's just the last few years at Kickstart, seeing a lot of people going to Faang companies as well as startups and through the entire spectrum. Before that at Box, from like 5-10 people all the way to 1,000 people. Box is much bigger now as well. And before that at eBay, again fairly small when I joined, and now it's like massive. So I suppose my experience has been in like growing companies from small to big ones, as such. So seen both sides as well, and I'm a big fan of being at fan companies. Just putting it out there very mildly. So.
All right, gents. Let's get started in with I'd say the most challenging question that I think many people ask. I know that many of our students ask this to us while they are going through the program and thinking about what next. Is who should even think about joining a startup? Right? Clearly, startups are their own kettle of fish. They are fast-paced. They, in very many cases, are not organized. Processes are not in place. The mission itself changes very significantly from time to time. Are there any type of character traits, or are there any things that people should be very comfortable with if they want to thrive in a startup? So I'm going to start with you, right? Box was really small when you joined. I remember the story you told me. You actually walked into a room to have a meeting, and Aaron Levy was sleeping on the couch, and so they decided, hey, we can't use this room. Let's just go to the coffee shop, right? So from that small all the way up to what it is today, what's important to know when you are thinking of considering a startup?
A lot of things. I'm sure like an essay can be written on this. But like couple of things stand out. One has to be comfortable with uncertainty, and one has to enjoy uncertainty, not just be comfortable with it, not just have it as a neutral option to certainty, but like prefer uncertainty over certainty. Like the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride that comes, being in a small setup that largely doesn't exactly know where it's going, and it is driven a lot by market forces more than its own internal force. Is It can be very thrilling, and can also be very stressful depending on how you see it. But if you find it thrilling, then startups are for you. That's one. The other, at a high level, the other thing, which is very important for being in a startup, is to realize that it's a lifestyle, right? You have to plan for a few years of this. You can't just be saying, let me try and see what happens for a year, and if I don't get the excitement I want, like, I'll quit. Like, you have to spend some 10 years of it, and a few startups, and one of them or two of them will work out for you. So so it's not a short-term decision, and one has to be fundamentally comfortable with uncertainty. Those are the two standout characteristics. So how they differ from being at a Faang company.
Vineet, anything that you want to add in terms of like who should be thinking about this, who should not be thinking about this?
Yeah, building up on what Soham already said, I think risk averse or risk seeking nature is definitely one of the components, because a lot of startups fail, but if they make it big, they make it really big, right? So if you are that kind of person who prefers more stability, more predictability, then maybe startup is not for you. But if you're early in your career, and if you feel that, yes, I can take chances, I believe in this company, I believe in the product, and I want to grow with it, then I think startup may work out really well. And then the other thing is, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, go ahead, Vineet.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, because startups are usually, like, again, depending on at what point you join, but if you're joining really early, then you may need to wear different hats. So, for example, in the established companies, the roles are kind of defined that, okay, a standard fungible software development engineer would be working on mostly on the backend side. The front-end engineer would be working on the front-end side. But in startup, you may want to be more flexible. So they may tomorrow ask you to start digging into different databases that you never heard of, or start picking up front-end stuff, depending on the business need, depending on where the team is, where the project is, etc.
So should one really think about startups as a repeat game, right? In the sense that there is high risk, so you don't know which ones work. Obviously, the risk diminishes as a startup moves down the let's say Series B, C, D, and now I suppose E. So many companies are remaining private right till the end. Is it truly about committing and saying that, yeah, I might not get the first one right, I might not get the second one right, but if I stick to it, somewhere along the way, my ability to choose will get better. And so fundamentally, if you're thinking about startups, should you be thinking that, hey, I might have to repeat this a couple of times before I get this right?
Yeah, no, there is certainly there is. I mean, there is a non-trivial amount of luck as well involved. But like you said, your ability to choose certainly gets better from one to the next, like that. And what I've also found is that if you start your own at any point, like, and it may not be like a formal incorporated startup with funding or whatnot, just your own volition to start something on the side and try to sell it, just that simple act will accelerate your learning on how to choose a good one down the lane. Like, if say whatever your project you start, you try, sell, doesn't really work, but the learning that you get from that, you can use to pick good startups as well. But it is yes, it is not like a one and done thing. Like, you could join Google and pretty much guaranteed that potentially your kid is also going to work for Google. Like, really, that's not what startup mentality is. Like, you have to get in thinking, realizing that you just have to learn. You have to learn what is successful, what how it works, what makes something successful, what kills things, and then take those learnings. And if you're not lucky in the first one, go take them to the second one, refine them, take them to the third one, refine them, and then somewhere along the way, it works out. That's generally how I've seen it work. And comparatively, in a Faang company, you get much more stability as such.
Hey, Gaurav, good to have you here on the speaker panel, man.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you, everyone, for having me.
I see you with the same glass of beer.
I am. That doesn't
Always.
change. Always.
Awesome. Gaurav, you think this is like a repeat game? Startups a repeat game?
Sorry, I actually just joined, so I missed some context.
Yeah, so quick context. So we're talking about Faang versus startups, right? What are the choices between these career paths? Are there true choices? Is there a false choice? And so we're just trying to explore this. And the question I asked Soham just now is, when you're thinking about startup, knowing how risky they are potentially, is it a safe bet to say that if you are thinking about it from a career choice perspective, then you should think about this as a repeat game, that you probably have to go through a couple of startups before you hit one that really rocks? Do you see that differently? Do you think, yeah, if you're committing to a startup, fundamentally commit to the fact that you might have to choose a couple, or do you think, no, you choose one, doesn't work out, don't necessarily need to continue?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I definitely think I agree with Soham. It's not a one-shot trick. There are a lot of factors that beyond you, your skill set, your determination and drive, that determine the success of the company. So it could happen that in a certain situation, it might not be the right place, right time, right market, right product, everything. But if you keep up with the intensity that you want to actually have a startup experience, you want to build your career like that, you should be open to trying a few out. It's a very personal choice. So everyone has different conditions to discuss. But I would say that you should definitely try out a few if the first one doesn't work out.
So, I actually have a very strong view on this. My view is that it is absolutely the only way, right? And my view actually comes from a investing standpoint. If you look at the best VCs in the world, even their track record is maybe 1:5. If you're phenomenal, right? More like 1:10. And so if the best VCs in the world who are betting on these, thinking about these, learning, investing, doing this day to day, if their best odds are 1:10 or maybe 1:5, you've got to think about doing this at least a couple of times. But let's move away from startups, right? Let's move away from startups. Now, let's say I am an engineer. I'm deciding what next, guys, and I'm now saying, okay, you know what? I'm open to considering both startups or Faang companies. It's very early in my in my thought process. How the hell do I go about getting attention from these companies, right? Is there completely a different approach to reach out and get the attention of the Faang sets of folks? Is it very, very different to try and, how do I even reach out, connect, find out which are the right startups to look at? So maybe we'll go like this. Vineet, given your vantage point in Amazon and the fact that you were at ShopBop before, how does one get the attention of recruiters in startups versus, let's say, Faang companies, or Faang companies versus startups? Do I need to be doing fundamentally different things?
So my anecdotal experience says that the processes in Faang companies or any big established companies are kind of rigid. So they have a certain channels that, okay, you have to go through these particular channels. For any fresh graduates, that they have dedicated new hiring channels from colleges. For experienced people, they have dedicated different lanes, and they have strict processes that everybody has to follow. Whereas in startups, it's usually a little more flexible. So networking, reaching out to people works better in the startup area compared to Fangs, in my opinion. Because even if you reach out to a manager in Fang, there is no guarantee that the manager is going to get you an interview slot. It totally depends on whether the manager is the hiring manager himself or herself, or if it is a completely separate team, then he or she may not have that much influence. It totally depends on that other side of recruiters and managers. But in startup mode, this situation could be a lot more fluid, like because the by definition, like they are kind of small, so people have a lot more say in networking and in influencing other people's decision on who to interview and who to not.
So, Soham, is it true that if you are looking at a startup versus, let's say, Faang, or you're looking, or let's invert it, let's say you're looking at a Faang company versus a startup, then is it fair to say that, on the Faang side, getting their attention is not as challenging because they have tons of recruiters, they have these recruiting machines, they have these recruiting engines, and the core there is really to make sure that you have transcribed your experience in a very solid way, let's say on LinkedIn or on some of the other platforms, versus, let's say, on a startup, which is much more unorganized. So you need to figure out which is a startup, how do they work, and then figure out how to reach them. Maybe spend more time in terms of the Faang side of things. How do you get the attention of the top Faang companies from a recruiting perspective?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's much more, like, it's magnitude easier to get attention from Faang companies. I mean, those have massive recruiting machines, like hundreds and thousands of recruiters. The pipelines and the numbers are like so big that you have to manage it like a company in itself, like it's a recruiting company. And so the data mining capabilities, the capabilities to find profiles, find engineers, and such is also so vast and so deep that practically anybody who's breathing has been connected by a recruiter at a Faang company. So if your profile has anything interesting, even a little bit of interesting thing in it, quite likely either you're already connected by a Faang recruiter, or if you just reach out to them on LinkedIn, they are going to respond to you pretty quickly back. The versus in a small company, what happens is that you don't have that much money to really use the tools that these guys might be using. You don't have that many recruiters and such either, and so you can only reach out to a fewer people in a limited amount of time, and so it's quite likely that the startup that you want to reach just doesn't know about you. So you have to be much more proactive about it. Go to Crunchbase and find companies in your field, or let's say you like fintech companies or something like that. You list the fintech companies, you narrow down based on the whatever criteria you have, and you actually proactively reach out. That works much better in that sense.
Gaurav, actually, before I ask you the question, let me just quickly introduce you. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do it earlier. So Gaurav, like Soham, was very early at Box, was a senior director there, and now is a senior director at Confluence. Gaurav, how did you find Box in the early days? What was the process that you went through? Did a recruiter reach you? And if they did, how did you do your research? What are some of the things you thought about before you decided to join?
Yes, someone had reached me early at Box. again, I think Vox at that time when I joined I wouldn't call it necessarily like a pure startup, which is like 20%, 50% team. It was relatively in a early stage, but still smaller, but maybe smaller than a medium size. So that's how they reached out. Now, I think an important question you're asking, Ryan, is about research before joining a startup, because
Right.
I think, and should we discuss that a little bit more?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Because I think inherently startups are like almost equivalent to a risk. So you probably have to do a little bit more research and due diligence before you decide. There are a couple of steps I would like to call out. Number one, it's first of all, it's a very individual and a personal question. So people need to understand if they really want to do it. Forget the risk, forget the financial outcome or not outcome. If people themselves have convinced that they want to go try out something smaller, it's kind of like a big fish in a small pond, higher impact, higher exposure, then that's step number one. Step number two would be, I think you kind of pointed out, see what the product is, whether you can actually associate yourself with that product. So, for example, if there is a startup that is doing something, um, let's say in AI, and if AI is not something that fascinates me, then there's really no point of going there because you're committing a lot when you join a startup. So think about the domain, think whether you can actually associate yourself with the product and the domain. Third, try the product out, see if you feel convinced. If it's a consumer product, definitely try it out. If it's an enterprise product, put yourself in the shoes of the company and see if they will find value in that product. Again, that's how you first take it personally, then look at the domain, then look at the product. And then the final bar would be to see what type of people are invested in that company. When I say invested, it's not just the investors, but early employees, the founders. Look at their background, look at their credibility, because ultimately it's the people that are going to stay together because the startup's going to go up and down, success, failure, all that is going to happen. But the people is what is going to make it stick and click. And then ultimately, there's like a couple of numbers, like how much money has been invested, how much outstanding stock and options do they have, what valuation have they got based on the funding they've received, so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of a math that goes on. But before we get to the math, there are these fundamental things that one should consider. Hope that
Awesome. So, that's good. So since we started talking about research, and by the way, guys, if anybody has questions, just raise your hand, right? I'm going to take one full round of questions right now, and then I'm going to go to some of the other areas that we want to explore. So just, there's a button here that which is like it shows like a hi-fi hand. Just raise your hand and I'll keep bringing folks up to the dais, to the stage to speak and ask your questions. Adam, I've just pulled you up. You should be up in a minute. So guys, when you're thinking about researching a startup, there's a really good resource out there. It is the Wealthfront Career Starter List, right? Wealthfront is a company that I think most people would know. They come out with a list of companies to get started with every year.
Launching companies.
Yeah, career launching companies, and they do a very good job of trying to figure out whether these companies are profitable, are they growing, and I think there's a third. I think they should be between 50 million to 100 million, something above 50 million.
So Ryan, it's three things precisely. One is the revenues between 30 and 300 million, because a lot of companies die before 30 and they become stagnant before 30. So you pass that milestone. And beyond 300 million revenue, the compensation isn't too attractive sometimes. So that's the range. That's one. The second criteria they do is positive unit economics, right? Because it is possible to spend a whole bunch of money and just show growth, but if the unit economics are not working out, you'll probably never turn profitable. So that's the other thing they filter for. And the third thing is that these companies are growing at least 50% year over year in revenue, and so that's those are the three things that are that's the entry ticket to be into that list. And Andy Ratcliffe, who curates it, he himself was a founder of Benchmark Capital, so he goes around every year asking the top VC firms, just like in companies there is a brand hierarchy, there is a brand hierarchy in VC firms also. So he only goes to the top VC firms and asks these three questions and gets companies to be put on that list. So that's how the list is made. And for those who those who understand it, it's a freaking gold mine of a list. Very easy to find as well on it, and many of those companies have very similar interview processes like that of Faang company. So it's just they're just going, and that journey is like you just pump more money and you just go. Fine. So it's an excellent list as such.
Awesome. All right, man. We've got folks up here to take questions. By the way, guys, Vineet, Gaurav, Soham are all part of the IK platform. Vineet and Gaurav are active instructors as part of the platform. I think we have Adam.
So is Adam, yeah.
So is Adam, exactly.
Yeah.
Adam, your mentor on the platform as well. Good to see you here, dude. Quick background, if I remember correctly. Adam, you took the program, you took the IK program, and post that joined Google. Is that right?
Yes, I joined IK in 2017, and then while at that time I was already in Apple, and then I took a little bit more time to prepare, and then I joined Google 1 year after IK.
Awesome, Adam. Did you have any question? Is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, two quick questions. One is on a couple of occasions I heard Soham mention he prefer or he recommend a fan more than startup. That's the first question. Why, Soham? The second question is just now did you guys mention a website or something that gave us all the criteria and the ranking for the, or I didn't quite catch what you guys mentioned. Yeah, that's all.
So let me take this. Let me take the second one, Adam, and then I'll hand this over to Soham. Yeah, proud alumni. Good to have you here. Moving to Google is a phenomenal outcome after the program. Adam, to the second part of your question, and then I'm going to hand this over to Soham. So there is a list that comes out every year by Wealthfront. Right? Wealthfront is a fintech company run by Andrew Radcliffe. He used to be the founder of Benchmark Capital, very well established in the ecosystem, highly deep amount of expertise. He puts together this list where he assesses all the fast-growing startups that you could join, right? Career launching companies is what he calls them. And you can find them all over. You can find it anywhere on the web. Just go to Google and search Wealthfront career list, right? Career starter list.
Career launching company.
Career launching company, sorry. And he has 3 criteria on which he evaluates these companies. He doesn't rank them in order. So he doesn't say this is number 1, this is number 2. He just puts out a list and says, if you are thinking about startups, then this is a good set of startups that you could launch your company at because the odds of them succeeding are higher than most, and their unit economics are also very, very good, right? So that's a good list to look at. Soham, I know you have a strong view about this, right? You have a strong view about why Faang makes more sense, and we'll talk about the fat fire after this. But what's your thought process? Why do you believe so strongly that Faang is a much better bet now than startups?
Sorry, before I go there, is there a way to pin that list somewhere here? I don't know if that's the case in Clubhouse. But anyway, the career launching companies is what I meant. So let's see. For Faang, I mean, lots of reasons now. The summary, I'll start with the summary. The summary, Adam, is that today Faang gives practically everything that a startup would give. Right now, and there was a time when these large companies, the world was like large companies versus small companies. Like you join a small nimble startup and it will eat the lunch of the large company that doesn't move fast enough, and hence you'll get the market share and you'll make history. But obviously large companies have figured that out now, right? And for the last decade or so they have figured it out. That this is what's happening from the small places, and so they are now running the shop, right? Where you get all the advantages of a small company plus the stability of a big company. Right? So as I'm sure you know, being there, right? Initiatives like self-driving car and health initiatives, like they are they were incubated within Google as startups, right? And then they were spun out. Even otherwise, the the rest and west culture in startups is sort of in large companies is generally going away. Like the slight bit of excitement is being built up more than before. The and so you spend 10 years at a large company, like you not only get the thrill of a startup, you also get the compensation, right? Both. And the yet another big reason actually to be at large companies is that the innovation at scale, right, can only happen in large companies now, right? See, just yesterday, Google open sourced the transformer with the trillion data points. Like something like that would never happen in a small company, right? Lots of tools, lots of systems that have come out in the last couple of decades, they have come out from large companies and then percolated down for it. So innovation at large scale, like for large scale data, large scale systems, can only happen when you have that kind of infrastructure, when you have that kind of data available to you. And small companies can innovate more in processes and more in like joining disparate things together, like say rideshare. So rideshare innovation happen in the small companies, but any deep tech innovations will likely only happen in big companies going forward, and that has sort of happened in the last decade as well. So so that's yet another reason. Plus, obviously, Ryan talked about the fat fire thing. Ryan, you should explain what fat fire is. But generally, the idea is to sort of retire with a large enough nest egg. And that's much more surety comes about being at a Faang company in that sense. The the recruiting bar is also quite different. Like large companies also hire people who are very driven compared to like domain experts, right? Which startups tend to hire. Anyway, so like those are some of the reasons for being in large companies.
Thank you.
Awesome. So that's quite a counterintuitive point, guys, that innovation today, the way it's set up, and some of the most innovative things that we are seeing are in fact coming out of large companies, right? I would say the most, possibly amongst the top 3 most successful startups in the last 10 years has actually come out of Amazon, which is AWS, right? We don't think about AWS necessarily as a startup, but it was a startup within Amazon. I mean, it's done so well that the next CEO is from there, right? Vineet, just spend maybe a minute on this point, right? How does Amazon, I was joking the other day saying that Jeff Bezos is the only CEO that I've ever known who has left the company on day one, right? So there's this day one culture at Amazon. They seem to be innovating, inventing, wandering around, inventing like crazy, very startup-ish kind of culture. Do you see that at Amazon? When you are at Amazon, do you believe that, hey, this is very startup oriented, innovation is happening at a crazy pace, and so we are likely to invent as much or if not better than startups? And maybe talk about the case of AWS, because many people, when they think about starting their career, they think that, hey, if I go to a startup, it's going to be much more inventive, and that might not actually be the case anymore.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree 100% with everything that Soham said. And even my personal opinion is also like I'm more inclined towards Faang than startup. Regarding innovation, like AWS is clearly the market leader and the most visible outcome of an innovation inside a big company. But there are a few others also, right? Like, for example, Kindle. Kindle is also very popular, started in Amazon. And there are like many other groups which are also like some proprietary information, so can't really disclose a lot of them. But there are many groups which are starting at the same, starting along the same path of constant innovation, trying something different, willingness to fail, and taking calculated risks. As long as you have good data to justify your decision, like that is encouraged. So that is, I agree with Soham that like they have not just the infrastructure, but also money, right, to spend on trying out these different initiatives and seeing whether it works. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. Like you learn from your mistakes and you move on. Right now, I am in a group called Amazon Live. So I won't say that it is like a completely novel idea. Like live shopping experience is Amazon is not the first one, but my current org also acts like a startup, and we are also iterating over a lot of different concepts and trying out different things, see whether it works or not, and then continuously innovating on providing the best possible live shopping experience to the customers. So I definitely agree with that. I don't know whether I answered your question or not, but I just want to add
No,
one
yeah,
more thing.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one more thing to it is from the selfish point of view, I think your own brand is also another motivating reason to prefer Faang over a startup. Like, for example, if you have a name tag of Google, Amazon, Facebook on your resume, the probability of you getting noticed by the recruiters increases a lot. So compared to, let's say, there is a less chance that you join two startups and both go super big, right? Like as we discussed earlier, like there are quite the contrary, like many startups fail, some may make big, but having those names versus having names like Facebook, Amazon, Google on your resume matter a lot.
That's very interesting, Vineet. Very interesting point about signaling from your own resume. I actually am of the view that, and Sam and I talk about this a lot, is that today companies are more important from a signaling perspective than even a university. So a Google or a Facebook or an Amazon or any of these top companies, right? They are a better signaling device than even a Stanford or an MIT. So personal brand is a very interesting thing. Now, before I go to Aesop's question, just to round out this point. So 3 reasons, guys, why people typically are thinking about this trade-off, right? One is, where does it make sense for me? And Vineet added the thought about brand there. Second is, hey, I want to do really inventive work, right? And Soham's point was effectively that, hey, the most inventive work is coming from the top companies. And if you look at the top companies today, they've all realized that, keeping that startup culture is important. And so they are really an amalgamation of a whole bunch of different smaller companies. You take Facebook, there's separately for news feed, separately for Instagram, separately for WhatsApp, separately for Oculus, and even within each of those, they're very, very hacky, very, very startup-y. So the culture is pretty much the same, unlike the days of yore, right, where the older companies became much more traditional. Now, the third reason, and that's what I want to explore a bit right now, the third reason that people think about joining startups, right, versus a Faang, or why, making the decision, is compensation. And so where are you likely to get more compensation? How does one think about compensation? Is it true that if you want to make disproportionate wealth, life-changing wealth, right, or multi-generational changing wealth, that it is only possible to do it in a startup, or can you actually do this even at Faang? The question I'm going to put out is this. So there are these two terms right now, right, which is FIRE and Fat Fire. FIRE, the acronym was Financial Independence Retire Early, FIRE, right? And when this came up, there was a lot of excitement saying, hey, I want to be a FIRE person. I want to have this independence. I want to retire early. And when it started, the whole context was, hey, you can make enough of money and you can then go and live relatively, not frugal, but you could live a, let's say, relatively thin life, right? And you could, if you are not very spendy, you could live the rest of your life out after you work for, let's say, 5-7 years. Now there is this whole concept of Fat Fire, which is, hey, I want to retire early. I want to be financially independent, but I want to live a nice fat life, right? I want to enjoy the best. I don't want to be frugal. I want to live a really, really thriving life, spending as much as I want, doing as much as I want. And it's within this context that actually Faang versus startups is a really interesting proposition, because one of the thoughts at joining startups was, hey, if I join a startup, if I join early, if I get that equity, when this company goes on an IPOs, whether it's the first, second, or third one that I pick, I will make disproportionate amount of money. And so the risk and the time where I was earning less is all going to be totally worth it. What I want to question right now is that the only path, or is Faang actually possibly a better path even from a compensation perspective? I have some math around this. I'll come to that math in a second. Gaurav, what do you think? Do you think that financially to get these life-changing outcomes? Are startups better placed just financially over the long run, even assuming that they succeed, than the top companies, or do you not believe that?
Um, so I think better or not is slightly subjective based on how much risk you believe you can do or you can take, right? So maybe I can answer it that way, because this is a little
Sure.
tricky to explain in just like purely quantitative terms. So for example, if you feel like you don't want to take a lot of risk, but you actually definitely want a good financial stable future, definitely FANG companies today can start you off with good handsome amount of money, and with the period of time, you can work hard, grow, and make sure that you're keeping earning more and more money. And plus, I think the overall, we got to also consider the market in general, like the public stock market, where some of these companies have excelled beautifully. So just being in those companies and having that RSUs being handed to you, it's a great strategy to just earn a lot more money. For a startup, the biggest first thing is how much risk are you going to take? Because the reality is it's high risk, high reward. I mean, you cannot change that. A FANG company would be lower risk, good reward. A startup is way higher risk, but disproportionate and substantially higher reward. So you could, as you said, spend a few years really not making enough money, but if the startup does succeed, then it's sometimes 100x to 500x return, which is not necessarily possible in that time span at FANG.
Okay, so that's very interesting, Gaurav. I have a slightly different view on this, right? And I've been doing the math, and the math actually tells a different story. So it's tough to explain on a Clubhouse chat, but I'm going to try. Let's say you join a startup, right, as the VP of engineering very early. You join, and the founders give you 1%, right? And that's a large amount for a VP of engineering very early. The company's probably just Series A. Typical Series A investments today in the Bay Area. I was listening to an SVB chat yesterday, and SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, says that 10 million is a typical Series A raise, right? So, and let's say it's a 5x multiple. So you've essentially earned 1% equity at 50 million. Typical time to a unicorn is between 6 to 10 years, right? And by that amount of time, the the company has diluted significantly, right? So let's say you had 80% dilution. Now that 1% at the time of the company being a unicorn is 0.2, right? So you now own 0.2% of $1 billion, right? 1% of that would be 10 million, right? And 0.2% would be 2 million. So you have effectively, with that 1%, now let me just check my math. 10% would be 100 million, 1% would be 10, 0.2 would be 2 million. That's right, right? So you had to wait for 10 years, and you have now earned which you had 1%, which would be amongst the higher levels. You've now gone on to earn 2 million, right?
I think the biggest thing here is you assume that the initial grant is what you have kept for the next 8 years.
No, so I'm going to just build that up slowly, Gaurav, right? I'm going to build the example up slowly. So you start off saying that I'm going to get this 2 million, right? And we'll come to the refresher grants in a second. During that time, right, you have possibly earned compensation, which for the first 4-5 years, or maybe first 3-4 years, is lower than you would have earned at a FANG company, right? Now let's just compare equity to equity, because compensation wise, I think it's quite clear that the FANG companies would pay you more right through. Now let's say you join FANG. They're already established, they're already in, and this is to your point, Gaurav, they're already established, they're already in the market. As a, let's say, senior director, VP, you get, let's say, 600K, right? Maybe possibly more. I'm just being a little conservative. Now that of that 600, 300K is equity and the rest is cash. Over the 10 years, that 300K itself is 3 million. And these companies are also growing like crazy, and their multiples are also growing like crazy, right? And in both cases, you're getting refresher grants. You're getting refresher grants in startups, and you're getting refresher grants in FANG companies. So even the pure equity value, and that is where these companies have been unlike any companies in the past. The sheer compounding of their equity, essentially you are betting on Jeff Bezos as being your financial manager, right? The way in which these companies have grown and the ability for them to offer equity that is growing so fast and that is publicly tradable, even my argument is, even from an equity standpoint, it does make much more sense in most cases to actually bet on the FANG companies, right? So what Vineet was saying, and both Gaurav and Vineet were saying earlier, is what it comes down to is it's not wealth, because wealth you are likely to make as much, if not more, in any of the FANG companies, level for level. It is not necessary inventiveness, because the FANG companies are inventing as much. It is not necessarily personal brand, because the brand is better at top companies. It really comes down to fundamentally what you feel like doing, right? What do you identify with, right? And obviously, where is career growth more? And that's possibly the next thing we should cover, guys. How does career growth work? Is it different for different folks? But we have a bunch of people who have come up for questions. Let me just hand it over to Aesop. Aesop, you had a question?
Yeah, I think what you guys covered in the last 15 minutes or so kind of answered it indirectly, but it seems like the pros that you guys are touting for joining a startup is only if you do so, if you join at a point very early, or you're founding a startup, or you have significant stake, where your personal outcome is affected by the success of the company. So that seems to be what is being discussed. So I was wondering if there is a benefit in maybe the angle of becoming a better engineer if you join a startup where you are not the in the first 10 members. Do you think you can become a better engineer at a FANG versus at a startup where you would hypothetically be involved in doing more projects? Just you have to build things faster, and you're going to be in charge of more things because there's less horsepower. Wanted your opinion on if you can be what do you think of your learning as an engineer at a FANG versus a startup?
Okay,
Yeah,
that's a great question. Gaurav, just hold on a second. I want to add something to that question and then have you guys answer it. So I want to link this to career paths, right? Clearly at a startup, you have more breadth. You have to work on many things. The startup itself has less resources, and so it's highly likely from a career perspective that you will have exposure to many more things versus the FANG companies where things are much more organized and maybe you have more depth. So within that context, Gaurav, from a career development, both from a learning as well as, let's say, moving up in your career to different levels faster, how do you see the trade-off between the two?
Yeah, my answer is probably going to be not very black and white. And I'm going to speak from my own experiences at a larger company and then experiences at I wouldn't call it necessarily like a very early startup, but that's like one of the career launching phases where it's, like between 30 and 300 million, where there is enough of product market fit and stuff like that. A big company, which I have a huge respect for, makes you a very well-rounded, disciplined engineer because you learn a lot of software discipline fundamentals. When you come out of a college, you are a student who knows how to code. But when you work at a big, large company, you learn the discipline of the entire software development lifecycle because these companies have done this well. They have the right processes, practices, all of that, which really makes you like a very well-tuned, fine engineer. In a smaller company, in a much more faster growing, dynamic, frankly, chaotic environment, you learn the entrepreneurial skills of being able to be leverageable or more scrappier or more resourceful when you're engineering. The other thing that a smaller company gives you is that you become a generalist very quickly because on a given day, you are doing everything from CSS and JavaScript in your UI to your APIs to your backend to your infrastructure to databases. So that type of this fire hose exposure and breadth, you are higher probability of getting into a much smaller company than a larger company. So there are pros and cons to both. I wouldn't call one better over other.
Interesting. So does that matter by level, guys? We've not explored this by level. If from a career, and so maybe you can add into this.
Actually,
from a career, go ahead.
Brian, sorry, may I just add one more point?
Yeah, Vineet, go for it, please.
Yeah, so I think Gaurav's analysis is spot on. I just want to add one more thing, that if the impression is that in the larger companies, like, you may not grow as much, is that's what I want to call out. Like, that is not the case, at least in the FANG companies, because in Amazon we call something a bar, right? Like, and the bar keeps increasing, meaning that if you are operating at, let's say, SD2 level, you need to constantly grow to meet the bar. So they are constantly challenging you, not just in terms of responsibilities, but also it is expected from you to be a better version of yourself, even without anything else changing. So that way, like, you cannot be stagnant just because the company is big. So it might come up to you that how much you want to grow and how do you want to grow, but a growth is absolutely necessary, even just to survive, not just thrive in the big companies, especially FANG.
Cool. So you were saying something earlier?
No, nothing more than what both of these guys have said. Really, just better engineer has it's not like one type of engineer is better than the other. It's like whether you value breadth or whether you value depth. Also, I think these days FANG companies or really just products, like lot of emphasis these days wherever you go, whether it's small company or big company, is to take ownership of things, end-to-end ownership of things. And so it's not like if you have never worked in front end, you are never going to learn front end at a big company. You will, just by osmosis, you'll pick up quite a bit of it, right? Yes, you will never become as good as someone who owns front end, but you'll know enough about it. So that isn't a reason, that just breadth isn't a reason to join a startup. See, the reason to join a startup is if you really connect with the mission of it, right? Like, say diabetes, right? There is someone I know who has type 1 diabetes, and a startup is working in type 1 diabetes. Now, there is no big company that we know of working in type 1 diabetes, and the person goes and joins that startup despite any other offers outside of it. So that's like a reason to join startup. Or the other reason to join a startup is to say that this group of people, it really believes in something, and I would like to be associated with this group of people. Like, that's how I had joined Box. Like, there was no other rational reason to really join Box, for example, in early days also. So those are some of the reasons you join startup for. It is less about I will become a better engineer here or there. I mean, that's very, very circumstantial, and you may get better or worse projects really anywhere. Just to answer the question from of Isab directly. And Isab, I love your name, by the way.
Yeah, it's a very cool name. All right, next question. Avinash, Otabek, Bhargav, Abhilash. I think we got 4 questions. Let's just take them one by one. Avinash, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions actually. So
yeah, go for it.
I was 2018 cohort. I was in December batch, and then now I am working for Netflix. So I have a couple of questions. The first question is, you were all mentioning about the stability, right? So whether it's FANG or startup, if you don't perform, you will be let go. So could you talk a bit more about the stability point of view? The second question was about the immigration. So currently we are all on, I am on H1B visa. So that is something which is actually stopping me from exploring startup. Do you guys think should that matter, or what would be the weight I should give to the immigration?
Okay, so 2 questions here. First of all, Avinash, congratulations. Moving from the interview Kickstart course to Netflix is a pretty awesome outcome. Like Adam, who moved into Google. So I'm 2 questions, right? The second one is related to immigration, and the first one is in terms of career security. What's your view? And anybody, Vineet, feel free to chime in as well.
So, Abhilash, good to see you. The thing is, it is not about not performing and letting go. Obviously, right? Like, anybody not performing will not succeed or will not thrive in a place. But it is about, even after you perform, what happens, right? You perform, the whole team is in it, and they perform very well. They do their best, and still they lose, right? Like, that's That is the issue in startups, right? In a big company, you could have a massive initiative like Wave, Google Wave or whatnot, and you could fail, and still it's all entirely fine, right? Like Google Circles, I mean, it could fail and it's all entirely fine, right? If those were startups, right, with the same type of people, like they would be looking for a job for it. So that's the idea. Now if I'm if I like if I'm an engineer on Google Wave, actually I can put it on my resume and say, hey, I was a part of this, and the initiative failed, because it's like a celebrated thing. Versus, I don't know if you might even remember, there was a new browser that had come about, right? Like you possibly don't even remember that, right? And if I put that on my resume and I worked on this new browser that had come about, you'd be like, hey, that was a dumb idea. So it's like stuff like that happens, right? There's a lot of signaling as part of a big company. That's one. And so it's about, and to summarize, it is more about performing and yet failing, right? Not performing is a completely different game, right, for it. So the second thing about visa, I actually empathize, Abhilash. This visa thing is a bit of a shit show. But the best way to think about this is that it is going to pass, right? Like, this visa shit is going to go away, and at some point you will live a life which is outside of those things, right, for it. So don't overly optimize for it. Now obviously it is a few years in some of the cases today. Even then, like, big companies often make decisions sans visa. Sometimes they do, like if you don't have enough time left on H1 and stuff, like they don't make you an offer. But otherwise, nearly all decisions are made without the visa. And Gaurav can potentially chime in, because he's in that capacity at the moment as well. He's in the exec team of a fast growing startup. So he can potentially say, if he's still here. It looks like he's left. But generally those decisions.
I think he was having some problems with his internet, so he messaged me.
Right. Yeah, no worries. Usually those decisions are not made based on visa. Like people figure it out. If they need you, they will figure it out. Like that's so try and make it more secondary in your thought process whenever you can. Find reasons and excuses to make it more secondary. I don't know if that helps, but that is the right way of looking at it, I think.
All right.
Yeah, this helps actually, Soham. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for your question. I love your profile picture, man. All right, I'm going to move forward. Otabek, I'm not sure if I got your name correct. How do you pronounce it?
You got it. Otabek.
Got it? All right, lovely name. Hey, go for it.
Great discussion. So far, a couple comments, and then I have a question. So far, what I hear is the comparison between Faang versus startup. At certain level, it's boiling down to how much risk and what kind of risk you're willing to take. Startup, a lot more risk, but potentially more reward, and Faang, more stability. And then the other piece I notice is for why people would want to work Faang versus startup might be a big culture, might be a big element to that. And my question is regarding flexibility in Faang. I'm a solution architect at a large healthcare company, and I work in a large enterprise. And flexibility between teams is a bit tough. So I know the need earlier talked about, for example, AWS and Kindle being almost like a startup within Amazon. So what's the likelihood of being able to switch once you're at Amazon, or being able to get into a group that is doing interesting things like that? Or, Vineet, was your point that every team at Amazon functions as a startup? Thank you.
That's a great question. Vineet, you want to take that mobility between different teams and opportunities at an Amazon? Is it like a moat where you can't move around, or is it easy to move around from teams over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I won't say it is. It's somewhere in the middle. It's not either that once you are in a team, you're stuck there, or it is extremely easy to just switch teams. Like when I moved from Shopbop to Amazon, like that was an internal transfer, but I still had to go through 4 rounds of interviews. So I would say it depends on which team you are applying for and what are their standards. However, it is definitely, I would say, easier to pass the interview, mainly because for internal transfers, the bar is that you have to meet the bar. You don't necessarily have to exceed the bar at that level. Whereas when you are joining from outside, at least I'm speaking for Amazon. I don't know how it is in Facebook and Google, but when you're coming from outside, the expectation is that you are better than 50% of the people at that level. So that criteria is not there for internal transfers, but you still have to go through interviews. And whether you have to go through interviews for any kind of switch, that depends on the team. So some teams make it mandatory, no matter where you are, no matter how awesome your performance is with your previous team, they still interview you for whatever reasons. Does that answer your question?
Yes, generally yes. How about the culture though of working within teams? Does it feel like a startup or does it feel like a big enterprise?
That also like changes from team to team. Like when I was part of ShopBop, it was very different from where I am right now. And it's actually interesting that even though ShopBop has more startup-y kind of feel because it was a separate company and it is much smaller compared to Amazon. Right now, the team I am in, Amazon Live, which is actually a much smaller initiative. So it feels more startup-y in the current team than it was in ShopBop. So culture would change again from team to team, and whether it was a subsidiary or like an initiative started within the company itself.
Awesome.
So
thank you. So
just to round out that question, what have we seen with folks in other companies? I think we have Ted. I saw Ted in the audience. I'm going to try and bring Ted up because Ted's was at Facebook after the program. I want to just get his point of view in terms of Ted. I've sent you a request to move you up. All right, you're up. Sam, what's your view of this in some of the other companies, and then I'm going to go to Ted.
So you mean the mobility within
yeah
mobility?
yes moving within teams.
Yeah, it's the culture. But the culture is different in different parts. Yes, certainly. Like I'm reminded of a meme. Maybe not the right word, but where they depict Microsoft culture versus Google culture versus Facebook culture, and in Microsoft culture you'll see different parts of Microsoft like with guns holding. It's like it was actually quite funny and quite insightful. So culture absolutely can be different, and one has to be quite aware of it. But within company, mobility is not restricted as such. Even when I was at Box, which is sort of by far a very small company, within that also the restrictions were just not present as such. One has to just keep the culture in mind before moving. Like you have to find out and say like this org, this VP, this executive team, this BU has what kind of culture. You have to actually explore that and then make the move, certainly. But if someone is wanting to make the move, right, very likely they have also seen something exciting in some other part of the company as well. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly, but generally speaking, I've not seen too much trouble within internal mobility, especially if you're performing well in the place that you are at. Now, if you're not performing well, and the reason is actually culture, and you just don't, or like some relationship-based reason where you just don't gel with your manager and stuff, then yes, it does become harder. Because if I'm trying to accept that person, the first thing I'm going to see is how have you been doing in the space that you are in right now. So those are the things that become bottlenecks. But otherwise, it is much easier to make the move internally compared to going outside and trying to prepare for interviews and then trying to sort of showcase your craft again and again. And does that answer the question?
Yes, fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I also see Vladimir on the attendees. I believe he works at Google. Would be interesting to hear some of his points as well. Just going to nominate him, but thank you.
I'll get him up. Ted, good to have you, dude. I think we last spoke a couple of years ago, and for those of you who I'm not sure how many of you know Ted. Ted was one of our alums. He went from IK to Facebook. The way his preparation for interviews was like it should be framed, right? It was amazingly well done. The guy really put in time and up-leveled massively after the course. Ted, what's your first of all, really good to have you here, dude. What's it like in Facebook? Is it easy to move to different teams within Facebook? How does that work? And then I'm going to just take the next set of questions. And maybe stick around here, Ted. We could use your inputs on some of the questions. But in terms of mobility within teams at Facebook, how does that work?
Yeah. Sorry, Ryan, to interrupt. But given that it's beyond the hour, we may want to refresh the room and set some time expectations.
Okay, guys. Yeah, so sorry, Ted. Let me quickly refresh this.
Yeah,
So,
no
guys,
problem.
quick. We'll run this for another 10 minutes. We are talking about Faang versus startups as career opportunities for engineers. We've got a bunch of people here. We've got Soham, Vinit's at Amazon. We've just brought in Ted. Ted's at Facebook. There was Adam here for a second. Adam, for some time, Adam was at Google. And so we're kind of explore what are the different career paths. All of us have different opinions on which companies make more sense, and that's what we've been trying to explore. We're going to put out a white paper on all of this over the next couple of days, and so look forward to that. Also, please follow me and follow Soham. We are planning to do this once a week to start off with. We're going to explore very pertinent topics in careers around software engineering, not interviews per se, careers in general, right? And we plan to bring folks who are experts at different companies, at different roles, all specifically focusing on topics that are uniquely oriented towards engineering careers, right? So that's a quick pitch for what we are doing on Clubhouse. Ted, what's it like at Facebook, dude? What's the mobility?
Hey, yeah, first of all, I just wanted to thank you and Soham for everything with IK. I mean, I wouldn't be here without that course. I'm a big supporter of your course. So thank you first and foremost. I actually just joined to listen.
Thank you.
Sure, I can also talk. So mobility at Facebook is pretty much as I think someone else described it. You can't really do it unless you're performing well on your current team. So your manager is not going to take someone who's underperforming and ditch them off to another team, because ultimately you're hurting the company in doing that. So that's kind of the general sense. Usually the way it works is there are two ways. You can either just kind of make the decision on your own from talking to other managers and things like that. There's kind of an internal job tool where folks can say they're looking, managers can say they're hiring, and then kind of connect that way. And then there's also another option, which is pretty cool, actually. You get to do a hack a month with another team. So you go to another team for a few months, you talk to your manager, talk to the other team's manager. You get to go there, try it out, really get a sense for the team, their goal, whether you kind of work well with the people, and then decide whether you want to join that team or not. And then everything just kind of happens smoothly from there. Again, it's pretty much all about how you're performing, whether you're trusted, and that kind of thing. And from that point on, it's pretty easy, I would say, pretty straightforward.
Awesome. Thanks, Ted. Feel free to hang around here if you want to chime into any more questions. I'm going to wrap this question up by asking Vladimir the same thing. At Google, Vlad, what's it like? Is it easy to move to different teams or no?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm from 2017's IK cohort. So I joined Google right after IK.
Awesome.
Before Google, I was at Oracle for a few years. So compared to other companies where I worked before, it is very easy. So Google encourages people to work on things which they really love to do and love to work. So that's why we have initially when candidates are joining company, there is a team matching round where candidates are speaking with hiring managers and trying to understand is it fit from both sides, if candidate likes this team and if candidate also fits to this team. So it could be a few different rounds with different managers, and then a recruiter will ask opinion, like what candidate likes more. So I personally haven't changed my team, so I really like what I'm doing there, and it offers nice growth opportunities. But I saw other people who are joined our team from other teams, or who left our team and joined some other team within the company. So we have also internal tool with all open positions, and each Googler can schedule a meeting with hiring manager and have some informal discussions about to learn more about job at this team, as well as we also have some other internal resources, courses for other people who wants to change either ladders or go, for example, from from other similar kind of technical roles to software engineering. So yeah, I would say it's pretty easy, and it's even encouraged people to work on something that they're really interested in.
Awesome, Vlad. Thank you. Great move from IK to Google, and thanks for the inputs there. So Otabek, it looks like it's fairly mobile. Amazon seems to be a little bit more structured. Facebook, Google seem to allow that fluidity a little bit more. All right, Bhargav, your question.
Hey, thanks for having this room.
No worries.
I don't have a question necessarily per se. So I'm coming from the total opposite end, where I, out of college, I was thinking about Faang, and I'm very grateful I managed to, get to the final rounds and even get one offer. But I decided ultimately to go to, and I think this is, when you have the title Fangs versus Startups, I think it's very important to distinguish what stage of the startup, right? Because if you're Series D, pre-IPO, your upside of joining as an engineer there, when the engineering org's still like, for example, like today, right? If you're on the job market, joining Stripe right now is not, wouldn't look too different than maybe, or like Robinhood, because they're about to IPO, right? And so that's like it's a very different stage of a startup versus like a Series A, or even more early a seed round, where there's a lot more risk involved, as well as like compensation in dilution, equity dilution over time, even with refreshing. So that's just one point I just wanted to bring up. Ryan, I think, and Soham, I think you guys like kind of touched on this previously, but with regards to financially, right? What makes more sense? Right? There's plenty of kids out of college like they're trying to fire, right? Like retire early, financial independence. Like that is an appealing thing, and yeah, it's like I'm curious as to seeing your analysis on it. Behind the napkin, math sort of tells me that, working at Faang and just saving, and even if you have like 10%, 8% from putting your money in the market, or what is it called, an IRA, you're better off retiring early that way than actually being an early engineer at a startup. But I think the potential upsides of one being a founder where you have a disproportionate amount of equity, that payout is way more potentially. And then second would be in the case of acqui-hires and acquisitions, I think you do end up sort of making more. So I don't necessarily have a question, but I am curious about your sort of analysis. And I see Soham,
Sure.
you guys have been at early stage. You've been at Box. You've been at eBay. So I'm curious as to know, like, sort of, if you what that sort of looks like,
Sure.
and the actual math.
Awesome, Bhargav. So, very quickly, I think we've already covered a little bit of this, but I think your first point was very, very interesting, which is that not all startups are equal, right? The level of risk goes up the earlier you go, right? So you're absolutely right, right? It is very different depending on when you join, right? Hence the career launching list. Now, in terms of the finances, I'm going to very quickly run through that. I won't get into detail because we've spent a lot of time on that already. Two things to be noted. As a founder, you're thinking very differently. That is not that's not an employee construct, right? So as a founder, you are, if the startup works, likely to do incredibly well. If the startup goes on to scale, right? If the startup doesn't scale, then obviously as a founder, you might still not make as much, even if there is an acqui-hire. The thing to be noted is that even if you make money from a startup, it is when you take into account risk-adjusted returns, they are much lower. Even in absolute terms, the way the compensation has split, the way these companies are doing in terms of the equity market, the fact that this is publicly traded, so essentially stock is just money that is not yet vested, right? These companies have grown at a CAGR of 25% or so over the last couple of decades, which is insane, right? So monetarily wise, even if you don't go for a risk-adjusted approach, you will likely make much more money in Faang, right? Than even a successful startup. That is, I think, the key to be kept in mind. Even in a successful startup, you will work as much and you will earn possibly less, even without adjusting for risk, right? The reason to work in a startup cannot be financial. Like Soham says, it needs to be whether this is something you want to do, right? None of us are signing a contract with God saying, hey, I'm going to live till I'm 85, I'm going to do everything I want to do, and then I'm going to come and see you, right? We don't sign that contract. We can go at any point of time. And so if you decide that I want to do only what I love, find a company that does that. That is really the case to work in a startup, right? There is no other reason. Soham, do you have anything to add to this? Otherwise, I'm going to just take the next two questions, and I need to jump off, Soham, because I have a meeting that I'm already running 20 minutes late for. So I'll take Rupal's question right after you add to what I was saying about the kind of stuff that Bhargav brought up. Was there anything more that you wanted to add?
No, so I think just Bhargav's question directly about the goal of FIRE and which one is better. I just wanted to round that out and say, Bhargav, I think the goal of FIRE early in your career may not be the right one. I think once you pass 30, 35 is when you should start thinking. Like the 20 to 35, you should just take massive risks because you can. And after that, the life will just sort of create boundaries for you and such and so. But if that is the goal, really any point of time, like Ryan mentioned, at this point, fortunately or otherwise, I think large companies is where it is at. The probability of you doing a FIRE in a smaller company is just going down by the hour for it. So unless obviously you are a founder, like you said, and you have a modest exit and so you have a lion's share of that exit, then yes, it does make sense. But that's a whole another ball game. Hope that helps.
All right, Rupal. But before I take your question, Rupal, Vineet, thanks a ton for being here. Vlad, Ted, thanks for jumping up. Soham, always good to have you here as well. I'm going to jump off, guys. I have a meeting that I'm running 20 minutes late for. This chat has been fabulous. Next week, same time, we are going to have another topic. And please feel free to ping this out to all your friends, any of your colleagues. We want to try and build a community on Clubhouse with folks who are interested in engineering careers and just try and drive as much value as you can. So cheers, guys. Have a good evening. I'm going to jump off. Soham's still here. So the questions are going to continue. All right, cheers, guys. Vineet, special thanks to you, dude. Bye.
No problem. Thanks. Pleasure's mine.
All right, folks. Rupal, good to see you again. How are you? What's going on?
Yeah, so I think after IK, like from past 6 months, I have joined like a mid-sized company. So I was interested in knowing like if anybody else here has joined like mid-size, not a Faang, not Facebook or Google, but a mid-sized company. So, I mean, I think the company culture is really good, and I was looking more for stability, not to get more pay and not getting more stress. So I was my main goal was to get more stability and longer term, stay in the company for longer term. So in terms of compensation and then like refreshers and whatnot, like what is the experience like and how can you basically get best out of that?
Let's see. Among the speaker list, I'm not sure if anybody is at a mid-sized company. Ted's Facebook, Vladimir's Google. Abid, Manoj, are you guys Are you guys? I'm not sure where you guys are, and then if you're able to answer. If anybody from the audience wants to take this, also happy to bring them up.
Yeah, I can speak for myself. This is Apit. First of all, Soham, thank you very much for putting the program together. It is awesome. And Vineet, I have been taking your class. So it is good. So far, so good. Rupal, actually, I am in the kind of mid-sized company as well. And that's like about, I am working through a mid-sized company, but into a big enterprise, right? Again, it depends upon what are your priorities, what are your values, what do you want to accomplish, right? So I have a lot of control from mid-sized company, but at the same time, I have an enterprise level experience, right? And I have been with them for the last 13 plus years. And now I am managing 3 different clients, and all of them are $100+ billion companies, right? So it's all, depends upon what are your priorities to take to next level, or you want to stay with them and maybe you will grow much better, or if you want to go towards Faang companies, and that's all I can add.
Sounds good, Abid. Thank you for that, Drupal. Knowing where you are, I think it's a right choice. You stay longer and you will get the dividends. Really, that's the point there. The the idea is that, I mean, it's a mid-sized company. Yes, it is trying to become big, and it has latched on to something which is in need today, and it will continue to grow. Like if you simply put the basic expected value math on the returns from startups versus returns from like companies that are bigger than startups, you will notice that the expected value is just much higher in it. Like you just have to stick to it, right? I'm more of a startup person, so it's very difficult for me to like stick to a large environment as such. Like I had said at the beginning of this, maybe you might have missed it, is that I enjoy, say, uncertainty, the ups and downs of stuff, which I discovered much later in my life as well. But otherwise, if you're looking for stability, I think you are at a very good place at this point, and just continue to grow there, and continue to just perform there, and sort of be vested in the interests of the company. I think you will do much better than being at a startup company. I'm not sure if this was exactly what you're looking for, but it does make sense for given where you are, I think. Awesome, folks. Manoj, one final question. I think we'll wrap it up in 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. First, thanks for this talk. It is really useful. And like you have shared some Wealthfront, right, career start company. Similarly, can you share some more resources to go a little deeper, like revenue number and all those things for these companies, especially startup or late stage startup?
So I don't think an organized one is available. So there are lots of like clickbait articles. Forbes produces stuff. There is something called a breakout list also, but those are more clickbait and more like favored kind of articles. Like if you know a good VC, you can get into that kind of thing.
That's what I have observed. Yeah. Like most of them are biased. Like many good companies,
exactly.
Slack, I did not see any good article. UiPath, Databricks.
Yeah, so see, some of these companies are past 300 million in revenue. So on the career launching companies list, you will not see it. But now finding revenues of those companies is very difficult. They don't publish those numbers as such. Like once you are in the interview process, you can ask. Like especially once you get an offer, you can go much deeper than that, and you can ask what is the growth rate that they have experienced. Right? You can ask what is the revenue range they are at, and they would tell you because they want you, right, at that point. So, but otherwise there is no like public source for it. It has to be through word of mouth or network and such. And sometimes recruiters also are generous enough to tell you over the first call, and they may not tell you the exact number, but you can always ask what is the range. Are you past 100 million a year in revenue, for example, or run rate, or are you past 10 million a year in run rate? Like how fast has the company been growing? Like, is it growing as much as mine is? Like, so if you ask a slightly slightly sort of mildly like that, you will get enough indication in the first call itself. But otherwise, there isn't a list that I know where the revenues are listed. Now there are estimates that people make based on some modeling, like PitchBook does and such, but they are often way off. There are other estimates that can be made by looking at the traffic. If the company is actually like something like a B2C company, like SEMrush and some of these tools can give some estimates, but they're all like estimates and they can be way off. But there's no organized list like the career launching companies, and in there also there are bigger companies, right? They're closer to 300 million revenue, so you could explore that from there as well.
Okay, and one more question here. When you are joining pre-IPO company, let's say stage startup, which is going to IPO maybe this year or next year. So how much equity you can expect? Let's say senior software engineer.
So generally speaking, senior software engineer, painting a broad stroke, a 300K per year is what they would typically want to give you. Let's say so about 200 in cash, which includes bonus, and about 100 in equity per year. So your equity value worth would somewhere be around 400K or so, 400, 500K, and the rest would be cash. So that's sort of a thumb rule you could use for that, for senior software engineer at something that is pre-IPO.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for being with us.
Soham.
Yes.
Sorry.
Hi. Yes, Hamid. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah,
I forgot.
I had a question. I raised up my hand, but that's okay. Just a couple of quick questions. Number one is that how the team movements happen when the one product is just dissolved, like in last time Apple got out of the autonomous cars, right? And how the team moved between among themselves, and how those got hired within the other teams, and how their managers move. And second, if you have a product idea, and I know that I proposed the one idea, and global manager of Amazon really liked that idea, and he wanted to be a partner with the company who I work for. But my company is like small enough; they are not going to be obviously partnering. And I know all the ingredients are there. There is a minimal integration needed, and I have a great product idea which is going to work. How I should proceed from there?
I mean, it seems like loaded questions. Vinny, do you want to take the first one about when a product doesn't work really? Where do the engineers go? How are they absorbed?
Yeah, sure. So it again depends on the situation. I have not experienced that firsthand in Amazon, but in Bloomberg, I have known that a pretty large group got dissolved. And at that time, for one of the advantages, as Soham mentioned before, they have the Faang or big established companies have a pretty big recruiting pipeline open. So there are always some teams who are looking for engineers. So in Bloomberg, they basically disperse those engineers to whichever teams who are looking for other engineers. At that time, I don't think anybody had to go through interviews or something. But that's the advantage of working at Faang or other big companies, that usually the risk of getting laid off is low. They would just find other places for you. Let me correct myself. I know a situation in Amazon also. Quidsy was another subsidiary which got shut down, but I don't think that they laid off anybody. They just made sure that all those employees working for Quidsy are absorbed in other parts of Amazon.
Correct. Abid, I'm not sure if anybody here is equipped to handle the second part of the question, including myself. I don't have direct experience with it. If I were to just, so my guess is going to be as good as yours in it. Generally, I mean, if I'm on the other side, the way I would make this decision is to avoid any conflict of interest and avoid and just look at what you're offering deeply and then make the call. And you have to get in properly. You connect with the decision maker, find the right decision makers, connect them with them properly, and so just give that shot. Sorry, I don't know if that part helps at all, but I hope the first one did from Vinay.
Definitely it does. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it. It's awesome.
Of course. Thank you, Abid. Appreciate it. And thanks again, Vineet. Thanks everybody for coming in, joining, asking questions, listening. And join us next week again, same time for something else interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Soham. Thanks for having me. It was great fun.
Thanks, Vineet. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.